Welcome to AFI Fest, presented by Audi. I'm Michael Lumpkin, the director of AFI Festivals. First, I want to thank those who support the festival, starting with Audi, our presenting sponsor for the past 17 years. Also, all of our many supporters, donors, and AFI members. And to our audience, thank you for joining us for the Apple original film, Fireball: Visitors from Darker Worlds. Tonight, we're happy to have with us the directors of Fireball, Werner Herzog and Clive Oppenheimer. Werner Herzog has written, produced, and directed more than 70 films, published prose, staged several operas, and acted in films and television. And in 2008, he was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Film. Clive Oppenheimer is professor of volcanology at the University of Cambridge, and he is the author of Eruptions That Shook the World, which inspired Into the Inferno. Welcome to you both. Joining them to discuss their new film is Moran Cerf, a neuroscientist and business professor at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, where he's also a member of the Institute on Complex Systems. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here, and Moran, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Werner and Clive, for joining me. And Clive, thank you for doing it at 4:30 a.m. England time. I'm happy to be joined by many of you with us who just watched the film and those two meteors that are going to answer some questions about them. And I want to start quickly with you, Clive, with a question about the inception of the film. So your previous film together, Into the Inferno, was about your field of expertise, volcanoes. I can see how this one came out. How did the film that you're looking at right now come about? How did you prepare for it?
Well, it was about a year after Into the Inferno was released, and I had a number of ideas for another movie. And on a visit to South Korea, I made a stop by the Korean Polar Research Institute, the people that you see in Antarctica. And they gave me a tour of the building, and they took me to the meteorites lab, and I saw these curated specimens. They've already got 1,000 meteorites, and each one in its little cubicle with a nitrogen-filled atmosphere in an ultra clean lab behind a window. And I immediately sensed something very visual about this veneration of these stones, and they've got so many. Why do they need to keep going back to get more of them? And while I was having a conversation with the meteoriticist, it just dawned on me that this was another fabulous geoscience topic that is very entangled with both the nature of the phenomena and the human culture that surrounds them. So after that, I got back home. I wrote a pitch in a week or so and got in touch with Werner, who seemed enthusiastic, and we were off again. But not being my topic, it required a lot more research than the volcano movie.
So I'm going to ask you in a second about your research, but before that, I'm going to move to you, Werner. So you get the call from Clive. You trust him because you did some work together before. How did you think about this idea when you heard it first? Did you immediately know that you want to do it? And if so, how did you prepare for it?
Sure, that was an easy one. I immediately knew this was going to be big because it had to do about things beyond science, about some sort of the joy of science, part of it, and the sense of awe of filmmaking, and of course, imagery on one side and exploration on the other side. So, and of course, all the influences that meteorites had on human culture, Aborigines in Australia, Jesuit lay brother in the Vatican at Castel Gandolfo Observatory, and on and on. And it's not just that Clive called me, he also sent a first proposal, very rough, with about 30 or so different possibilities where to shoot. Of course, that was overwhelming, too much. We knew it immediately. And we brought it down, what was possible, what was not redundant, what should we do, where were our main fascinations. So, and it came down very quickly to a very coherent and a very easy collaboration.
So tell me about it a little bit more. You have all of those ideas. How much of the film did you see in your mind before you started filming?
Well, you know about the events and certain events that fascinated me, both Clive and I knew it would be impossible to go and film there, like Mecca, the black stone, which is with all probability a meteorite that came down about 1,000 years before the Prophet Muhammad established Islam. And it was venerated for 1,000 years. And of course, today, hundreds of years ago, there was no way to somehow take it out from the Kaaba, the very center of the pilgrimage, and have it in a scientific lab. It's impossible. And neither I nor Clive are Muslims. You are not allowed as a non-Muslim to set foot into these holy sites. So we tried to engage a young Saudi fine filmmaker. He would go instead of us and with very precise instructions, but the custodians of the holy site never came up with a real permit. So we thought at one moment we could only rely on cell phone footage, that many hundreds and thousands of pilgrims are filming themselves, how they're rushing towards the black stone and try to touch it or to kiss it. So I wish I could have touched and kissed it as well, but it was obvious there were areas where we couldn't do it. And yet we came with a very beautiful solution. And there were quite a few other things where you can't do much because events were so big that you can barely imagine, like Chicxulub in the Yucatan Peninsula, so big that the impact of an asteroid 65 million years ago was something like hundreds of millions of atomic bombs, Hiroshima size. Of course, you can only imagine, and I had Clive very eloquently describe it as if he were an eyewitness. So
I would add, Moran, that the vision for the film for me crystallized very, very early on. It was clear that it was it embraced our origins, the origins of life and our destiny, and also that it was about heaven and the heavens, the dialectic between ascent and descent from heaven, between heaven and earth, and also about the nocturnal, our wonder and awe of the cosmos, which I think for many of us, we've somewhat lost because we live in urban environments with so much light pollution that we never see the night sky anymore.
Clive, you heard something about the San Fernando earthquake here in Los Angeles. It was about how many years ago? 20, 25 years back.
That's right. Yes, the 1994 Northridge earthquake.
Yeah, okay.
So which struck in the middle of in the night in winter time, and so people ran from their homes, and pretty soon the emergency services were receiving calls because people had observed a strange silvery cloud, which they thought might be some emanations of noxious gas from the San Andreas Fault or something. And it was simply because the earthquake had knocked out the power grid, and so all the lights were out, and they were seeing the Milky Way for the first time in their lives.
So there's something that Werner said about you, Clive, that I'm experiencing even now when you speak. The film kind of comes as if we're joining you in a journey of exploration, and in many ways from your viewpoint. It's kind of like a science exploration with a scientist taking you hand in hand. You're the protagonist of this film in many ways, taking us on this journey. I'm curious, as a scientist, what is your experience being in front of a camera, being in this kind of domain that is not basically the lab that you're coming from, but suddenly the eyes of many of us in the lab?
I think one of the things, I'm trained in the geosciences and the natural sciences, but I've ended up in a geography department. And at least in the UK, geography it embraces all the epistemologies. So my colleagues come from the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences. A student taking our program will go to a lecture on Marx, then have a lecture about pet cemeteries in Edwardian Britain, and then get a lecture from me on subglacial volcanoes. So it's a real melting pot of ideas. And I think that's how I've come to be very fascinated about these entanglements of nature and culture, and also coming at it as a volcanologist. Science is not enough if you want to use volcanology, monitoring volcanoes, assessing hazards to protect populations that are threatened by them. There's a big gap between where the science gets you and where policy and decision making needs to happen, as of course we're seeing now with another kind of threat. So the journey is, I think, sort of unwrapping some of these entanglements. I'm not hugely comfortable being on camera, but I can cope with it.
Yes, but Clive, you're very good on camera. There's hardly anyone, because you're neither didactic nor are you condescending or so. You're excited and you're very competent. In this kind of combination, you only have maybe David Attenborough at the moment, who is really good at that. And who else? You are there, and it's part of it is casting not only you, and we would always speak to each other and we would say we are not journalists, we are poets out there. We are not allowing any catalogue of questions, no paper ever. Nobody was ever, you were never allowed to have any paper. Sometimes from behind the camera, you started to speak about, let's say, the gigantic asteroid that hit our planet Earth, and I wake up. So,
if we do a bad job in this interview, you can do it again. Like if we're not asking the right question, please feel free to cut it in.
But the audience must not forget that for Clive, it is just approaching 5 in the morning. I got up at 4.
Yes, so do wake me up.
So yes, wake up, bring some life in it.
So Werner, I have actually a question that builds on that, on kind of what is your input into kind of scenes that happen in real time. Basically, what I want to know is, are there things that are in the movie that you don't want, that you say, I wish this wasn't in the movie, or the opposite, a scene that you really wish was in the movie that isn't in it?
I think everything that's important is in the movie, and there's nothing out that we had to delete for whatever reason. We wish we could have been maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes longer, but it appeared at the end when it was a little too long, the audience must never get the feeling, not for a second, oh, this was a little too long, because it ruins the perception of a film. So rather leaving the audience, oh, I would love to see more.
Yeah, there's always, an embarrassment of riches and some difficult choices that need to be made. But we each of us have fought over individual clips that were important to us, and it is exactly how it should be. I don't think there's anything that really had to be in there that isn't.
For those who make films, I think it's important that we have to let them know we did not film any other event or personality that's not in the film. Everything that we filmed, every subject, every event, every person that we filmed actually appears in the film. So we didn't shoot much superfluous stuff. And I try to be very disciplined. My heart always sinks when somebody proudly announces to me, oh, I've shot 450 hours of footage and I'm editing since 2 years. My heart sinks because the profession, the market, and I say it bluntly, the market does not allow that. Under normal circumstances, you have to be responsible with the money and with the time. And it goes really wild when I look at my very last feature film, Family Romance LLC, which I shot in Japan, the grand total of footage that I shot was 350 minutes. No, 320 minutes. Minutes.
I have a sense that you two have clear personalities, agreeable and very determined. How do you guys deal with disagreements? Were there any? How did you resolve them in a movie that basically has two directors?
Mano a mano.
Well, los hombres. No, but it's a good question because immediately the producers came to us and the whole thing, they always have a tendency to have too many lawyers involved and too many drafts of a contract. And they asked us, how would we delineate our mutual responsibilities and what would happen if we were really fighting hard over something, which idea, who would prevail. So I said to Clive, no, we are not going to do anything of that. We don't do that. It has to be solved in mutual trust, respect, and friendship. Friendship has to prevail if you are doing a film like that. And of course, we had some diverging opinions here and there, and we always fairly quickly came to Clive very hard. Clive got from me the next three things that he would put in. So it was an exchange of things that friends do.
Okay, I probed into your relationship. I'm going to go back for a second to filmography. The film talks about meteors. They're really hard to show. Can you tell us, Werner, how did you go about actually showing them? Did you try to actually film something that will resemble them? How did you go about something that happens so rarely?
Yes, well, we do have special effects in some of the movies that we even quote Deep Impact, for example. But you know what? One of the very big platform providers, I don't tell you which one of them told us when we showed them dashboard camera footage in extremely lousy resolution, made with tiny Russian dashboard cameras, 30 years old, from the Yeltsin time still. And they said, no, it's unacceptable. You have to film this content for our movie in 4K. And my answer to that was, you know what I said? Yes, we'll plant a camera solidly embedded and planted on Mount Rushmore. And we'll leave it there for 800,000 years. Maybe we are lucky to catch one of these events in 4K. We'll leave one or two other cameras in Antarctica for 2.5 million years, because cameras do not rust there. There is no humidity in the air. So let's wait for 2 million years. Maybe we can bring you the 4K footage that you really want from us. So
the camera is still there, and the sequel is going to have the footage that you're collecting right now in a couple of thousands of years.
Oh, no, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, and still nothing happens. You have much more chance with a surveillance camera in the bank. You can leave it maybe 15 or 25 years there, and you have some slight chance that a bank robber is going to come in. So
yeah, no, they wanted to know what date the big impact was going to happen.
Yeah.
But we did take we rented a very light sensitive camera, and we timed our filming in Australia at Wolf Creek Crater around a meteor shower. The footage though was just too noisy to use, but we stayed up all night. A couple of nights we were filming, in the hope that a meteor would illuminate the whole crater for us.
I actually read somewhere in preparing for this interview that most of the nights you were not sleeping in the tents or in the premises, but the cameras were, because it was...
Oh, sure.
More important.
When there's wind and there's dust in the desert, you better save the sound and camera equipment and the lenses in a good solid tent. And much of the time we would sleep just out in the sand, or one night I would climb into the crater and sleep in the very center of the crater, which was very, very strange and pleasant. So yes, the cameras are more important than our own, let's put it bluntly, than our own asses.
And Werner, remember Paul Paragon, our sound recordist, was always up in the night, always on his own initiative, going to record unusual nocturnal animals. So a very, very dedicated crew.
Yeah.
So I want to ask one question, Clive, about the ending of the film. Everyone that sees it right now has seen the film, so I'm not going to spoil anything. It ends with this dance ceremony, and I think that the interesting thing to me in that ceremony is the kind of line between a documentary that just kind of observes reality and one that creates it, because this dance was not danced by the people for 50 years. They basically created for you guys for the film. So the film actually created an event that wouldn't happen otherwise. Tell me about kind of the decisions that you made when it comes to documentary versus fiction film.
Yeah, so this was, again, actually very early in the concept of the film. I imagined that this would be the last scene. And we trained the cameras on the embers flying from the fire. That's the very last shot, the souls departing to the netherworld. This was a really fraught part of the shoot last year. We, just to reach Mer Island requires getting on smaller and smaller aircraft and tossing out some of our flight cases of film equipment at each airport. And we eventually got there. And it hadn't been easy to communicate with the islanders to make preparations. And we arrived, and they were expecting us, but they said, "Look, you've come in vain, because actually we can't really do this dance, and there is some footage from 50 years ago. Why don't you use that?" And we only had, I think we had 2 nights on the island, and so really only one day for filming. And we had some meetings with the elders and with Alo Tapim, who eventually see instructing on the choreography of the dance. And they were really quite clear that this wasn't going to be possible. And we explained that this was an important film. And I think that made, then they got it, and they very kindly mobilized and made this wonderful enactment of the dance. The other thing about Mer Island is that it's the very first ethnographic film was shot there in 1898 by Alfred Court Haddon, who was a zoologist, but he went to Mer Island to study marine invertebrates. But he became fascinated by the people canoeing him around the island, and he shot film of the dances. So this was also in mind of this very, very deep heritage. And in the end, it was just very extraordinary to see them perform this dance and on the sand there at sunset. So it was
but
very,
Moran,
very satisfying to come away with that.
Your question aims at something much deeper. And I think we are talking to filmmakers and at the AFI, and I'm constantly in conflict with them, because there's still this insipid sort of dictum out there and postulates out there that a documentary must not interfere. We must not invent. We must not stylize. We should be like the fly on the wall. No, we should not be like the fly on the wall. We are directors, we are creators. And in documentaries, I create events, I invent events. And we have to divorce. And there's another thing which I do not like about what I see and hear at AFI quite often. We have to divorce documentaries from journalism. Almost all that you see in terms of documentaries is a bastard child of journalism. And I don't like that. And I want to have something else, a new sort of breakthrough of cinema and documentaries, where we even invent and modify facts, but we should modify facts in such a way that they resemble truth more than reality. And we do, and I have always said we should look for a deeper truth, a deeper stratum of truth, and we reach that only by disassociating ourselves from the observing camera in the bank that waits for the bank robber, from the fly in the wall. We have to look for, I call it the ecstasy of truth. And the best example that I have is Michelangelo with the sculpture of Pietà in St. Peter's. Mary, the mother of Christ, holds the dead body of Christ in her arms. And when you look at the face of Christ, it's a 33-year-old man, but his mother is 17. The mother is 17. So my question is, did Michelangelo try to give us fake news, or did he try to cheat us or mislead us, defraud us? No, not so. He gives us a deep insight, the deep truth about the man of sorrows and about his mother, the Virgin. So that's how we should work in documentaries. And I'm talking mostly to deaf ears. And I think documentary filmmakers, some of them have started to look at the genre in a different way. And that's one of the things AFI has to really somehow look at in the future.
Thank you. I think I got from the two of you both answers I was hoping for in one question. We're getting the signals that it's coming to an end. So I want to ask you maybe two final questions, one each, about the experience of the last couple of months. So your movie is coming up in a time that in itself feels like end of the world. The movie speaks about kind of experiences of that. And generally, it's not a common experience for films to come out in this medium where people are watching us partially on platforms at home. What is your experience of the last couple of months, Clive? And what can it kind of inform people when it comes to how they should think about movies in these years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very strange when you make the film. Of course, you're looking forward to the release and touring with the film and having an immediate reaction with an audience and feedback and discussions. So I miss all of that. It's not the same to be up in my loft at 5 a.m. Rather than with you in LA. It's also been quite a difficult time to get headspace. We're in the university. We've reopened for business, but all my teaching is online. So I'm now lecturing to my laptop for pre-recorded sessions for the students. So there's a steep learning curve in just figuring out how to do the routine business in a very unusual format. For me, it's dried up a lot of space for kind of creative headroom and to think about the next project, for example.
Do you want to tell us what's the next project before I turn to Werner with a similar question? What is the next project for you, Clive?
I've always got a few thoughts that are at various stages of maturity for future films. If there's no possibility to go and shoot anything, I have quite a lot of archive from Antarctica and elsewhere, the Sahara. But I've started a writing project which is looking at some of the historical perspectives on ideas in my field, in volcanology. So sort of reaching back to late 18th century, very, very fascinating characters, late 18th, early 19th century, trotting around volcanoes, but thinking in very, very modern ways about how they work and without sophisticated spectrometers and other scientific equipment, coming to actually very, very logical, sensible conclusions about what goes on down there.
Werner, I have a similar question to you. I want you to tell me what you're working on right now. I see that you have something that you want to add to the previous question. And I also wanted to say something about what's your aim with this film? Like, who is it for in terms of audience, or what is it hoping to change? All in one question.
The very last, if we find one single kid that gets excited and wants to become a scientist, we have mission accomplished. To the beginning of your question, yes, we have to get acquainted that much is moving to streaming platforms, but it has started way before the COVID epidemic. So we have to explore what the possibilities are. Even our conversation is via the internet. And as to my own project, since I can't venture out with a camera, I'm writing short stories, poetry, but I have 2 feature films ready to shoot tomorrow if I can. And if they are financed, and if I can venture out with actors.
Thank you so much. This has been everything I wanted to get from 30 minutes of conversation with you is in. And I hope that the audience enjoyed the film as much as I did, and really gets to use this unique time we're in to spread the word and get it to as many people who can, like the kids that Werner mentioned, think of becoming scientists or using this as a platform to launch exploration of their own. Thank you so much, Clive and Werner.
And thank you very much.
You,
and good luck to all the filmmakers who are watching us. Best of luck.